privilege and honor to turn it over to today's moderator, Carol Mead. Carol, it's all yours.
Thank you, Jamie, and thank you to Iowa Healthiest State for again helping support us in this work. I'm going to dive right into our slides today and give a little bit of an overview of the Make It OK campaign, and then get to our panelists so that we can dive into the topic of discussion of walking alongside you, supporting kids and young adults on their with their mental health and through some of the struggles that they've been experiencing. So some of you may already know about the Make It OK campaign, but I always enjoy going over this a little bit at the beginning. And, I think oftentimes we think to ourselves, what can I do to help reduce the stigma and start conversations around mental health and helping people understand mental health. And the Make It OK campaign takes kind of a three-prong approach: learn, talk, and share. So at the very beginning, I'm going to share a little bit of information with you and talk about some data related to youth and mental illness. And then we're going to get into the talking piece, and that's where our panel of experts will come in, and we'll talk about better understanding how the last year and some of the things that we've gone through have impacted our young people, and then continue to think about how you can help and what you can do to make it okay with your friends and families and in your community. So in 2020, many of you may have been on some of our other events. We had several virtual Make It OK sessions in 2020 about stopping the stigma and increasing awareness. And we received some really good feedback that we'd really like to focus more on specific situations and how you can specifically help and what you can say and not say. So we will be hosting 3 sessions in the upcoming months. This is our first one, supporting kids and young adults. And then our next one will be supporting employees and your team members. And the third one is yet to be determined. So stay tuned. I want to just review, kind of hitting on that, the learning aspect. I want to talk about just a little bit of data around kids and young adults. We know that 20% of adolescents may experience a mental health issue in any given year. 50% of all mental health issues are established by the age of 14 and 75 by the age of 24. And 10% of children and young people aged 15 through 16 have a clinically diagnosable mental health issue. Yet 70% of kids and adolescents who experience mental health have not had the appropriate interventions at a sufficiently early age. So we know, like with most conditions, early identification is really, really important in terms of how we support people and helping people get and remain healthy. So we have some of this data that comes from the Iowa Department of Public Health Youth Risk Behavior Survey. It's some pretty new data, and you'll see that it's actually from 2018. So I suspect that in the last 2 years, knowing what we know happened in 2020, that some of this data might be different. But many kids are sharing that they are feeling sad or hopeless, and that this is increasing, particularly in those grade ranges where we are specifically doing this survey. That's in the 6th, 8th, and 11th grade. We know that individuals of color tend to experience an increase in some of these symptoms, and also it was identified that in particular female students of color are experiencing persistent sadness or hopelessness more than any other group of students. We also know that many young people are experiencing suicidal ideation. This is often very alarming for some of us, particularly those of us who are parents and maybe are not extremely comfortable having conversations about this topic, but we know that this number is increasing. And again, I think if we looked at the data from 2020, or once we have that data, it's also going to show an increase. And some of the alarming data really is around female students and some of our youth of color. So you can see there that second bullet point, 26% of female students considered suicide compared to 15% of males. And nearly 1 in 3 11th grade females seriously considered suicide, more than males or females in 6th or 8th grade. In 2018, over 3,000 students in 6th, 8th, and 11th grade, and again, those are the grades that are surveyed, had an actual suicide attempt, and these are youth in the state of Iowa. So I think, again, we can see how concerning that is, and really quite alarming when we see some of this data. And we know, again, that our youth of color, particularly our Latinx females, attempted suicide 10%, an increase in 10% in 2018 from 2014. Another really high-risk population is our LGBTQ youth in our community and in our state. And the data around this population is really quite alarming. And I think that this is a group of kids and adults that is really at risk. And when you look at the data on this slide, I think that we can all agree that, you know, we need to really focus on how we can better support these youth in our schools and in our community. I always think it's important that we identify, how do you call for help? We know that sometimes sessions like this can trigger some emotions that maybe we weren't prepared for. So the National Suicide Hotline is listed here, the Foundation 2 Crisis Services, the Iowa Warm Line, and then also Your Life Iowa are all really excellent resources for you if you need them at this time. I want to take just a moment to thank all of our local agencies who have helped support this. Tanager Place, Foundation 2, who we just mentioned, who provide some wonderful crisis services in our community, Unity Point Health, Mercy Medical Center here in Cedar Rapids, and then Linn County National Alliance for the Mentally Ill, or NAMI. If you go to that website, NAMI has some really excellent resources for community members and for families and those of us who may be struggling with mental illness. I am going to not waste any time now to introduce our panelists, and then we'll get right into the discussion. So I'm going to start with Sarah Nightingale. Sarah is the TIES program coordinator here at St. Luke's. I've had the good fortune of working with Sarah pretty closely the last few years. She began her career in the mental health field in 2010 when she graduated from the University of Iowa with a major in psychology. She went to get her master's degree at Chicago School of Professional Psychology and Forensic Psychology, and has worked with people of all ages from 18 months to 98 years old, but she finds her best fit in working with kids and adolescents. She started her career here at Unity Point in 2015, and at that time she worked on the Child and Adolescent Inpatient Behavioral Health Unit. And currently she is the TIES program coordinator, and she started in that role in 2017. Dr. Lisa Doyle is a school counselor at Roosevelt Creative Corridor Business Academy here in Cedar Rapids. She has her bachelor's degree in elementary education, a master's degree in special education, a master's degree in school counseling, and a doctorate in counseling studies. She has 32 years of experience in the educational setting, ranging from teaching elementary students in classroom, physical education, teaching high school special education students, and finally, in her current role, in her 14th year of being a school counselor. She and her husband, Jim, of 25 years, have 5 children, 2 grandchildren, 2 dogs, and 4 grand dogs. Amy Grask is the Director of Mental Health Services at Four Oaks. Amy is the Director of Mental Health Services. Amy grew up in Cedar Rapids and returned to the area after receiving her undergraduate degree from Pepperdine University. She's been with Four Oaks. It'll be 24 years on Friday, it looks like. In the first 12 years of Amy's career, she worked in a variety of programs within Four Oaks, from PMIC to in-home services to case management to program management over the juvenile justice programming. And for the last 12 years, Amy's sole focus has been mental health. She's currently has oversight over all therapy, counseling, and BHIS services, which includes inpatient programming, outpatient clinics in 4 cities, and school-based services in 3 school districts. Amy is the mom of 3 very active kiddos, girls ages 18 and 15, and a son who's 12. Amy's faith is very important to her, and she loves to run, hike, travel, and attend her children's sporting events. Mary Gessing is a counselor at Kirkwood Community College. Mary is a licensed mental health counselor with a Master's of Arts in Student Development and Counseling, with an emphasis in higher education from the University of Iowa, and advanced certification in clinical mental health. Mary has worked with adults and young adults for over 30 years and has a passion for working with many types of concerns facing this population. So I want to thank you all for being part of this panel. You guys are all very busy and passionate about your work, I can see. I am going to go ahead, and I don't know if it's helpful for me to unshare my screen so we can see your faces. Is that okay? Because I think it would be nice if we can see each other's faces as we're having this discussion. So I'm going to open it up to just kind of a general question that you are all welcome to jump in on, and whoever wants to go first, please do that. But just tell us, what are you seeing right now as the youth and young adults that were in our community as they've gone through this past year of pandemic and struggle, and as we get to the other side of this, what are you seeing? Anybody want to go first? Go, Lisa. Yeah.
In the schools that I'm in the middle school now, so in the school setting, in the middle school setting, there's a lot of anxiety with kids coming into school anyway, and coming into 6th grade from elementary in this new building and it's new. But I would say probably the biggest thing that I see is anxiety, just widespread anxiety, and not just from students, but also from adults, and just like fear of the unknown. And so seeing lots of that also in the middle school, lots of gender identity issues, more so than ever. All right. And just want to learn and know more about that, and not knowing it's a time of change for kids anyway. So their body changing, and then understanding what the changes are and identifying feelings. And there's just lots of questions and lots of wondering and experimenting and things like that. So those are 2 of the main things. And in middle school, we have lots of friendship and drama, and media plays a huge part in a lot of the issues that come up.
Yeah.
So things that we have never, wouldn't have experienced long ago when I was in school. But that's the new realm is dealing with the social media and issues with that. So somebody else go ahead and jump in.
Excellent. Sarah, you want to go maybe from a younger perspective?
Yes, absolutely. So, I work with the preschool and early elementary age. And so one of the things that I'm noticing with, especially now since the pandemic with our younger kids, is some separation anxiety where that maybe didn't exist previously. They were very used to going to daycares or preschools, going out and about in the world. And now kids are experiencing some of that, since really a lot of their world has been mainly at home. Another one of the challenges that we're seeing specifically right now is, the age range, that preschool age range is the area where kids are not only learning academics, but they're also learning some of the basics for social emotional skills. So some of our kids have missed a year of socializing with peers, learning how to, how to interact with some of those, interact with peers as well as interact with other adults besides parents that maybe commonly they are doing by that age range. And so we're seeing just some extra increase in challenges with learning those social emotional skills and being able to then come back into that structure. So especially, I think all kids, but especially young kids really thrive on routine. And so we've had routine completely changed multiple times over the last year. And with that change in routine, oftentimes comes various behaviors because they are so used to having consistency and not really knowing how to navigate change yet from such a young age.
Excellent. Okay, so we've heard about middle schoolers and younger children. Amy, do you want to give us an idea maybe how the high school, what you're seeing with that age group?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, I would echo certainly what Lisa was saying, especially in our outpatient clinics. We're seeing a lot of anxiety and depression from high school age kids. But I think the other thing that I wanted to note for people is that, a lot of the kids that would maybe we wouldn't see in our clinics or we wouldn't be hearing about, just they wouldn't come up necessarily is just, the kids who are, a lot of kids these days have a really big heart for their friends and reaching out and trying to support them as they're battling through some of the things that have come as a result of the pandemic and the derecho here in Iowa is, they don't know necessarily how to process and handle what they're absorbing from their friends, and they want to help, they want to be there to support them, but taking on all that stuff, they're not necessarily equipped to know how to deal with that themselves. Got 2 high school girls myself, and so I'm seeing that through my own girls and their friends, but we're also seeing that in our clinics as well.
Excellent. And Mary, how about our young adults, those folks you're seeing out there at Kirkwood?
I would say the same as Amy and Lisa said. We're seeing so much anxiety and depression. We're also seeing a lot of just adjustment and transitional stuff because this is not what they dreamed of their college life looking like, right? Mm-hmm. And so to figure out how do I, even if I move to college, it's not the same. And it's not what my dream was. And so trying to help them navigate through that, and now flipping suddenly to, okay, we're back open and we're here, and how is that? That's bringing up so much anxiety the past couple of weeks for students that we've been seeing. But also even though we've been doing virtual counseling for this whole time, some people don't feel comfortable accessing that because they're at home with their families and they don't have space. So I think we've also had those people who couldn't access services just because we weren't open to come do that in person and it wasn't safe to do that. So there have been people that are isolated, which then makes their anxiety, depression, that much worse. Yeah.
I think one other thing too is just, grieving the loss of things that they've missed out on. Right. I'm a senior this year, and there's a lot of things that looked differently for her, and kids missing out on sports seasons at the end of last year and different things. And so, just feeling that loss for themselves, and it may not seem like a big, traumatic event, like like something else that someone's experienced, but it is still a loss for them, and it is still something that is real for them.
Absolutely. That's a good call out, Amy. I think that's one of the things that we've talked a lot about in these virtual sessions, that the grief and loss, and we should never, even though as adults, some of these things in the whole scheme of life, we might be able to say, you know, that's not that big of a deal, but for them it is, and to acknowledge that and help them grieve through that. I really like you guys have kind of talked about some of the trends that you were seeing outside of COVID that you would probably see anyway, the relationship stuff, the things that we know kids go through, but how COVID and, you know, probably even, you know, people that were impacted by the derecho, we know in our area, we experienced some extra stuff in 2020. Kind of thinking about stigma with kiddos and young people in these other in the various age groups. How does mental illness stigma, what does that look like for kids and young adults? Or how do you see it?
I think for high school kids, you know, social media can just be the devil sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just an incredible amount of pressure on kids to be okay and to have it all together and to present this, you know, picture perfect themed, you know, existence. And that's just not reality. And so, you know, there are certainly some good things that come from social media. And I see, you know, we can see a lot of support and things of that nature for kids, but I think there's a lot of bullying and a lot of harassment and a lot of things that come, you know, people feel pressure to be something or do something that they're just not feeling capable of doing. And that can really, you know, really harm our kids.
That's a good call. You know, I think back to the olden days when I was a high schooler, you could go home and leave your stuff at school, right? That's not the case so much. I'm sorry, Lisa, you go ahead and go next.
Sarah, okay, I'll go and then Sarah. All right. Just to piggyback on what Amy was saying too is like teasing from peers, possibly, or just the stigma of that, but also families just accepting that there is something wrong with a child, or maybe even with the parent, and then along with that, what resources and who needs to know about this. And it's tough to, first of all, admit it, identify it, and then to get the help, because that means that other people would know, or that other people need to be involved. And that's a really tough obstacle. And we deal with a lot of English language learners. And so with other cultures and everything like that, there's a high stigma with mental health in other cultures as well, and getting the help and admitting that there's something that needs to be worked on. So
yeah, that's good. Go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah, from the preschool kids' perspective, I think one of the biggest things is that oftentimes for our preschoolers, it looks different. So mental illness comes out in behaviors. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times we think of behavior and emotions as separate, but for everybody, but also our preschoolers, those are kind of one and the same. And so a lot of emotional pieces come out as behaviors. And so I think sometimes that can lead to the stigma that mental health or mental health concerns don't exist for our preschoolers. They're too young to have the burden or the weight of the world. And it doesn't mean that those things, that things don't affect them. And I think to one of your points, Carol, that you said earlier, is that sometimes we see some of the challenges our preschools go through as just there's child stuff. It's just, you know, it's not that big of a deal. It's in the grand scheme of things, you know, somebody stole your toy, not a big deal. But to a young child, a preschooler whose world is relatively small, that is a big deal and a big challenge to overcome. And so I think the stigma can come with one, it doesn't exist for preschoolers. It's not a concern yet when it is something that can be worked on. And a lot of times it comes out in behaviors, which are often those frustrating or annoying or just irritating things that they do. But that is oftentimes how they're able to say they need some help or say they need some support. And it doesn't always come from those verbal or even maybe what we see in some of the, middle school or teenage populations, which is, potentially self-harm or, cries for help on social media or things like that. Our kids do that in behaviors.
Sometimes I wonder about the stigma, especially those school age kids and younger kids, the stigma that the parents feel, so my child is acting up behaviorally, and my willingness to seek help for, I'm feeling it as a parent, that stigma, or what's everybody else going to think if my kid has a mental health condition. Do you see that?
We especially see that in the TIES program, where it comes from the idea that that stigma of I must be a bad parent, or everyone else knows how to do this thing and I don't know how to do it. And so it can be challenging then to reach out for help, because I think a lot of individuals, they see themselves as kind of a lone island out there, the only one that's going through these struggles. And when there's reports from daycares or preschoolers or preschools in which maybe there's behaviors happening there as well, parents feel a little powerless in those moments, because especially they don't have any control in those situations, or they feel unable to help in those environments. And so it can lead to a lot of feeling helpless or kind of hopeless as well.
Okay, I'm going to move on to another question. When we think about our young people and young adults, what do you think gets in the way of them, reaching out for help or asking for assistance when they're struggling?
I can start.
Yeah.
For a lot of the people that we work with, it's the first time they can come to counseling confidentially. Their parents don't have to know about it. It's free. At this point, we don't have to use insurance. So it's kind of a safe place. But what we find is that students wait a very long time because they don't know what counseling looks like. Right. And so until someone can tell them, here's what counseling might look like, we're not going to make you tell all your deep, dark secrets, some of those kinds of things. Until they can figure out what counseling looks like, many of them don't reach out. And so the more we can at all ages put the word out there, this is what counseling could look like. This is the kind of help you could get. And you're not broken if you come to counseling, because many of them are fighting those stigmas from the world inside themselves. And so just kind of working through some of that is most helpful in getting people to the resources that they need.
Excellent. That's such a good point, because you're right. At that age, that's the first time they sort of can make some of those decisions on their own. And they don't often have their, a parent there with them to make that decision for them.
Right.
What about middle school or high school kids? Go ahead, Lisa. I see you unmuted yourself.
Well, I was just thinking on the flip side of that, in middle school, we do need parent permission to be able. I mean, they can talk to me a couple times, and then it requires parent permission to be able to, consistently either come in and talk to me, or if we're referring out to another agency or anything like that. So it does take that figuring out, I do need to talk to somebody, something's going on, then being able to talk to someone, being able to tell parents, and then the stigma that we were talking about before, whether it's with the students and feeling that they're going to be teased or looked down upon, or the parents are not being able to access the resources, or figure out even what the resources are. If we get them connected with the resource, another one is like transportation there, or for us, a language barrier. And just there's a lot that kids have to deal with, and then they have to deal with admitting and getting their parents on board. So that's a big one in the middle school.
Excellent. So thinking about that, then, what are some things that you think that you guys currently do, or that we as parents or community members or people who care about young people, what can we do to start to create an environment to help young people know it's okay to start to talk about their feelings and struggles? So what can we do if we have a young person in our life, or maybe we're in an environment where we could have that impact?
I can start. I think, the biggest thing is you don't have to have all the answers to be an ally for a child. And that is just something that we all, a lot of times they might just need someone to listen to them. They might just need someone to, give them a hug and tell them it's okay, or they might need more help than that. And that's fine. But just to know that, you don't have to know everything to reach out and show someone that you care. I also think that, just like the campaign, we need to make it okay to not be okay. And I think for most of us, who would consider ourselves pro-social adults, sometime over the last 14 or 15 months, we've had moments or stretches of time where we've not been okay ourselves. And so just being able to have those open dialogues with the youth in your life, whether they're seem to be okay or not, because what you share with them, they might pass on to friends. And so just, continuing to normalize that piece. And then also, I think, we need to think about our mental health just like we do our physical health. And so what happens when you stop taking care of yourself physically? If you stop drinking water, if you stop getting, out in the fresh air and sunlight, if you stop exercising, whatever, those are all going to have impacts on you. And there's a lot that's happened over the last, year and a couple months that has impacted everybody's mental health. And so, just making sure that we're prioritizing and giving time to those things. So, finding connection to, with someone, even if it's for 5 minutes, just having that connection piece can make a huge difference. And then I think as a parent, I just want to share one thing, because I find myself struggling with this sometimes having teen girls, but, communicate to understand and not to win. And, whether we think what they're thinking or feeling is correct, it's their thoughts and their feelings, and we need to meet them where they're at. And then I'll stop talking.
I love that you said not to win. So like you don't always have to win. Is that what you meant by that? I love that.
Kind of coming off of that, Amy, I for our preschoolers as well, there's an element of communicating and not trying to win. So for a lot of our preschoolers, they don't have or they're struggling with the ability on how to express themselves. They're not always able to identify what a feeling is and what that feeling might be and what it looks like. They just know that something's not right, and so they're acting out. So I think on the one hand, I'm all about early intervention and talking about and teaching about feelings from a very young age, what those look like, how they feel in your body, so kids can start to identify those feelings. And what are some common situations that might make them feel that way. I think sometimes we start to save those conversations for as kids get older, but we can start having those conversations at 2, 3, and 4 years old, and being able to teach what that looks like and what they can do instead of acting out in those kind of inappropriate ways. And so I think, and kind of piggybacking off of what Amy said, in those moments where our kids do share their feelings with us, it might not always look the way we think. So it might be we're telling them it's time to leave the park, and they go, "Oh, I don't want to leave." And it's not always about having to counteract that point. You can validate and acknowledge, yeah, man, it is disappointing when we have to stop doing something we have so much fun doing. And so I think sometimes a tendency as adults is to say, nope, we have to leave the park, in order to counteract that, and telling them, no, you can't. It's almost like we're telling them, no, you can't feel that way, when the important thing is to separate the behavior from the feeling, right? So it's okay to feel disappointed that you have to leave the park. There's nothing wrong with that. We still have to leave the park. So how do we do this in a healthy and appropriate way? So helping kids, separate those two and just validating and acknowledge that it's okay for them to be disappointed. It's okay for them to not want to put their shoes on when it's time to go. It's okay to feel those ways. It's just, what do we do with that feeling? And that's a lot of what we talk with our parents about is that. And then another thing I think, from a non-professional standpoint, just out in the world, when you see parents struggling, their kids having that tantrum in Target or wherever, just I have many parents come to my program and share how they had a parent come up and just say, "You're doing great, mom, keep it up," or you got this, dad, you can do it, this isn't easy, I've been there. And how impactful that's been for them, just to get that acknowledgement. I've also heard the opposite, where they see people staring and pointing, and how that creates that feeling and that stigma as well. So even just being a community member out in the world, when you see a parent struggling, just acknowledging, like, I see you're trying your best, and I see that you're putting in your best effort, and none of this is easy, and it's okay, and I've seen the impact of that for parents, and I think that can be really important.
That's excellent. So I heard model it. I heard Amy say we need to model it. We need to acknowledge when we're not okay, that it's okay not to be okay, and have those conversations starting at a very young age, and help people start to identify that. Because you know what? Guess what? I'm sitting here. There's 2 ice cream trucks sitting right outside my window. I wouldn't want to come in from the park today, but people have modeled that over the years, for most of us, and so that's where it needs to start. I want to make sure we hit on something that I think is really, really important. I have a young adult child. My youngest child is just finishing his sophomore year in college. So I know this is important to me. I have many friends, and we here work with many kids of all ages. And so I have people often ask me, what can I be looking for in either my child or kids that I'm working with? What are some signs or symptoms that a child or a young adult is struggling? And I think I would like each of you maybe to answer this question, since it does look different, I think, at different age groups. So, what does that look like, for example, Mary, in a young adult who's in high school? What should people be looking for? Especially if I'm a mom and I don't see my kid every day. What should I be watching for?
Yeah, I think changes, we look for changes in behavior, changes in mood. How are they taking care of themselves? How much are they connecting with you as opposed to what they have in the past? Just looking at that, even if you don't see them all the time, really paying attention to those changes in behavior, I would say. Are they isolating more? Just some of those kinds of things. I had another thought, but then it suddenly left my brain. I'll chime back in if I remember.
Chime back in if it comes to you. Okay, Amy, how about the adolescent, the older adolescent, maybe?
I would echo what Mary said, but I would also add, any change in friends or any change in their eating habits or their sleeping habits. And the last thing that I wanted to add was, just because someone's carrying something well doesn't mean it's not heavy. And so we really need to, even if our kids seem okay, making sure that we are, especially, with high school students or college age kids who are more independent from us as parents and do more things on their own. They may be gone from the home more because of activities or friends, really making sure that we're checking in with them and talking to them and being interested in, their life. And I remember just one quick thing, when my kids were in middle school, they would, driving in the car was like this time where they would just like vomit all this information. And it was a lot of stuff that like I could seriously live without knowing. Like I didn't need to know what Susie said to, Sally and blah, blah, blah. But it was like, I have to have these conversations and give that time and attention now so that later they'll tell me the important things because they know that I'm a safe person to talk to. So, even if your child appears to be okay, really making that intentional effort to to check in with them.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, Lisa, how about the middle school age kid? Anything you want to add to that?
I think that change in mood and change in appetite, like a marked change. And I know adolescents, and a lot of times when they're in middle school, they're already dealing with lots of changes themselves and trying to figure things out. But just noticing that, and I think in building relationships and listening and not making comments, it's hard as a parent, I know. And it's hard, you know, as a teacher as well, just to listen and just take it in and not just be quiet you know, and breathe while they're sharing, and also model that for them too as well. Because sometimes when kids are sharing with me, I will just go, okay, let's just take a deep breath together. Let's just breathe, because that's a lot. That's a lot for you to handle. So, and kids, you know, they respond to that, you know, and just to hear someone say that they hear them and that they are, maybe not that I understand where they're at, but I can understand those feelings of, I got a lot going on and I just need to breathe and take time and got somebody to listen. And also I think just watching their nonverbals, it's really hard with the mask on. And I think it's like so much harder, you know, for the last year and a half, when we're not able to see the lower part of somebody's face to be able to communicate to us what our mouth does and what our, you know, we can see body language, but I guess I never realized so much before the nonverbal that it happens from here on down, that we don't have the benefit of seeing now, slowly coming out. But just to notice the manners in the body, the hood up, the quiet withdrawing, whether it's at home or at school, and that communication, the communication piece is huge, I think. And as Amy, as you were sharing, just in listening to your own kids in the car, but also the communication amongst the teachers or with parents at home, communication is huge. That's where most of the time my kids always, our problems happen at home, is when there was no communication or not enough communication. So, but that's my piece.
That's excellent, thank you. I think we often feel like we're directing kids a lot, right? And so taking that time to listen is hard for us as adults sometimes, but so important. So thanks for emphasizing that. Sarah, how about littler kids?
Yeah, so behaviors, like I think I'm echoing what everyone's saying is the behaviors. One thing that might be a little different with preschoolers is you might not see the change in behavior as much because they've only been around for a few years and are just sort of emerging into being you know, little people. And so so we might not see the change in behaviors, but you may see more behaviors emerge. Again, our kids preschoolers aren't great about talking about what they're feeling. So it always comes out in those behavioral components. And so paying attention to what those are. I oftentimes talk to parents about if it's affecting daily life, that is sort of an indication that something is, you know, that you maybe can seek some support and help for that. All kids at this age have behaviors one way or another. It's just to what degree. And so if it's affecting daily life enough, affecting your kind of mental well-being, parents have to be the initiators of this at this age, because preschoolers certainly can't do that. And so our adults have to be the ones to recognize some of those things, not just parents, but also daycare providers, preschool teachers, being able to identify those kids that just stand out a little bit more when they might be having some behavioral challenges. When it comes to talking to kids about those things, keeping those conversations very simple. No kid really enjoys a lecture, if we're being honest. Our preschoolers have a very short attention span, especially. And so when we're asking those questions, we're keeping things very simple. You know, I noticed when I told you it's time to pick up, you threw the blocks. Were you feeling angry about that? And sort of helping guide that process to identify those things, because they're not initially going to come out and say, I was angry about that, and that's why I threw the block. So you might have to help put the pieces together for them. But I think the biggest thing I always talk about is when to seek support is when you feel like it's affecting daily life. for not just you, not just maybe in your preschool setting, but for other children in the household or in that preschool setting, that it might be, beyond some general behavioral issues that all kids have at this age, and might be something a little more that would be helpful to be addressed.
Excellent.
Can I just echo? I remembered what I
please
was going
do.
to say. Sarah brought it up. It's just when having those conversations with young adults or anybody, is that I'm noticing these behaviors, and that's a little bit different, not like you. So kind of, can we talk about what's going on? Just always not just saying, hey, what's going on with you? Nobody wants that, but just saying, I've noticed these things. It gives them, have them take pause, like, oh, they notice, and yeah, maybe this is something that I need to talk about. So yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. That's a really, really good, I think that's a good scripting, as a parent and as an adult, of what we can say if we're noticing some of those things. Kind of on the flip side, let's say I am a young adult or a youth, and I feel like things aren't going really well. Are there some words that we can help give them? What are some things that some strategies we could give these young people to come to an adult, or let someone know that they need some help? What are some strategies we could give the young people?
Man, this is really tough, right? Because asking for help is hard for everyone. But I think, it's such a critical skill to learn all through life. I mean, even, right now I'm a single mom and I'm working full time and I'm trying to plan a graduation party and do all this stuff. And it's like, I can't do it all by myself. And that's okay. It's okay to ask for help. And you know what? There are lots of people in the world that love to help other people. And that makes you feel really good to be able to help someone. So I think, that's part of that, making it okay, is just reframing kind of what that looks like. But I think, it's also really brave and courageous to ask for help, to say that, you need support for something. And, that's another thing that can show your maturity as a young person growing up. It can also really strengthen, sort of your friendships or your relationships with other people. And by letting them in, being able to be a little bit vulnerable with the right people. And I think I would say, like, being clear and direct, even if you don't necessarily know the exact words, is, whatever words you can find, try to be clear or direct. Because I think sometimes, I think about kids who cut, and they may have, marks somewhere where other people can see them, and they think, oh, well, that person doesn't notice, so they don't care about me. And, we have to also, remind kids that other people in their life aren't mind readers. And so if they can be clear and direct as best as possible, that can be super helpful too. I'm going to stop talking because I have like 1,000 things written down, but chance.
Thank you for sharing that. I love that, Amy. Anybody else want to chime in there? If you want to help our young people, give them some strategies on how they could ask for help.
One of the things we do with our preschoolers in program, one of the very first things we work with parents on, is teaching their kids how to ask for help. And it is as simple as they're struggling putting a puzzle together. And not only, so a lot of times as adults, we like to jump in and help and fix and save the day. And so we teach our parents how to step back and give the child the words to use. So remember, if you need help, you can say, I need help, please. And so it starts as simple for our kids as asking for help when they're putting together a puzzle and they're struggling. And not only are we providing those exact words to say, so when a kid says those words, there's an adult who can know that they need help and help them work through what the situation might be. And so as they get older, it becomes less strange to ask for help, And of course that evolves over time as they get older, but as simple as learning when they're young, being able to say, I need that help. And so a lot of times we have our parents, if they identify their child might be frustrated or struggling with something, give that prompt on what words to use if they can ask for help. And then when they use those words, give them that positive, praise for following through and asking for help. And that can really kind of solidify that at such a young age, that the goal is it becomes less strange to ask for help as you get older, because you've learned from a young age what that looks like, how to say that, and that there's adults there that can help decipher through what you need help with if you don't always have the words to explain that.
Excellent. Excellent.
And I think also going off of that too, is that we teach our kids that they need a break. If I feel something happening, I'm not sure what's going on, I feel like I'm getting short with my friends, or the teacher's annoying me, or whatever it may be, and things are piling up. I need a break. All right. Whether the teacher calls, they come down and they take a break down here, or they need to take a walk around in the hallways, or whatever it is. I need a break. If they come in and take a break with one of us, a lot of times just sitting there, it might come out. If there's somebody that we have a relationship with them, or they are, they trust us, then a lot of times it'll come out what's going on. So I always tell them, go to a trusted adult. It doesn't have to be me. It can be, are you comfortable with your teacher? Are you comfortable with teacher across the hallway? Or who are you comfortable with the associate that's in there? It doesn't matter to me, as long as you can talk to somebody and tell somebody what's going on, and if more help needs to be gotten for you, then we'll take care of that. But it's just, who are your trusted adults in the building? Who are the people that, you can talk to your friends, yeah, but who are your trusted adults, and how can we connect you with the resources? So it's just taking that break, understanding that they need that time, they need that break, and to be able to get something off their chest, or maybe they just need to chill for a while and they can just breathe and get themselves back on track at that time. So being able to figure out what they need.
That's excellent advice. One of the strategies that actually a really good friend of mine did with her adolescent daughter, she had a hard time really verbalizing some of the stuff she was feeling. So they kind of turned it into a journal share, where her daughter would write the stuff down, and they started the conversation that way because it felt more comfortable. Mary, anything you want to add to that?
I was just going to say, sometimes we just need to put it in plain words. Like if you're just feeling wonky and you don't really know what's going on, and you don't know how to say what it is that's going on, come talk to somebody. Reach out to somebody who can support you. And just like your car, if you don't change the oil and get a tune-up, it's going to fall apart. So you don't have to wait till you're in a crisis to come in and talk to somebody. So when you're feeling a little bit off, reach out and talk to somebody and have them help you sort through what's going on.
That's such good advice, because it takes some of the mystery out of it and the magic out of it, right? It's just basic. I'm not feeling quite right today. I don't know what it is, but let's talk through it. And sometimes you'll identify that.
Well, I think the other thing too, just to piggyback off what Mary was saying, is sometimes if you are able to do that on the front end of something, you don't get to that dire straits place because you kind of nipped it in the bud. So that was a good point, Mary.
Yeah, excellent. We're running close to time, and there is one question in the chat that I'm going to throw it out there and see if anybody has any expertise in this area. So the question is, I know some young adults with goals involving military careers hesitate in getting professional help because a diagnosis in this area can inhibit their ability to apply or continue their military career. Do you see this obstacle much with seniors or college age students? So that might be more for Mary or Amy. Or is this something in your area of expertise?
I would say we do see that some. Again, we're in a lucky space for our students that they can come, and we don't have to put that on their health forms anywhere, that we don't have to submit any formal diagnosis anywhere, so they can come and get some support. But that is a concern for some branches of the military, and we have somebody who used to work for the military working for us, and she can help them navigate those waters. We have a VA person on campus who can help them navigate those waters. But just finding those resources that know how the system actually works can be so helpful.
Yeah, that is helpful. That's really good advice.
I
There's
think-
oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say one other thing. I think faith communities sometimes can be really helpful in this area if that's, you know, something that the person has in their life, because again, you're not billing through insurance and doing those kinds of things. So
Yeah, thank you for that. And there's other places, you know, Foundation 2 is another place that's confidential, and they don't, you know, you're not getting billed for anything there. So at least it's a place to start. I think giving people those resources so that they don't feel like they can't share anything, because we also know, as with any condition, right? If we don't take care of ourselves, it's just going to continue, which is going to inhibit our future plans regardless of what they are. So we really need to take care of ourselves and help ourselves get healthy. Here's a question, and Lisa, this, you might be one who would know about this. Does the Cedar Rapids Community School District hold seminars for parents about mental health? So that could help parents help their children feel like they should have access to help through the school, maybe, in order for parents to help.
We at the district, we have Grantwood AEA that a lot of times puts on workshops for various for parents and for educators on a multitude of topics. I'm not sure how that's advertised though. I mean, then we also have Tanager who does, so we get information to us, and it's the dissemination, or it might be on the school website, or it might be on the district website, or sometimes there's flyers that are printed, but it's, so there's various ways that we do workshops, whether it's through the area education agency, or whether it's us being a avenue for Tanager to let us know that they have workshops coming up. Those are usually the two that I get the most information about. But I think we can really work on how to communicate that more to parents, and to get that information out there so that parents know that they have access to those workshops.
And I think that, you know, the community can own that too. The Cedar Rapids isn't the only school district in our in Linn County or in this area. So I think that's something that maybe as a community we need to put some emphasis on, so that we are providing the support that parents need so that they can then support their youth.
And I also think just reaching out to one of us, you know, take down our information so that we can locate those resources for you and let you know what's coming up, or anything that we have heard about or that's been advertised to us.
Yeah, excellent. My computer says we're at 1 o'clock, which I think means we've come to our hour. This was a really, really good discussion with some excellent experts. So I want to thank you all for being a part of this today. I'm sure you had a lot more that you could have said. I had way more questions I could have asked, but I enjoyed your expertise, and I hope that those of you who are on the session enjoyed it as well. So have yourselves a great rest of your day.